Hey, ladies and gents, welcome back to looking at the second segment in the chapter 2 through 4 lecture. And this time we're looking at water, water everywhere. Now, the key feature of water and what gives it its sort of special capabilities is hydrogen bonds, right? Hydrogen bonds are created because of the electronegativity of oxygen. Oxygen pulls those electrons toward itself, so it takes on a partial negative charge. Hydrogens have that partial positive charge. So when water molecules are in community, when they're around each other, they will pull on one another and create these emergent properties of water. So again, water does special things to make life possible, and that happens because water is a polar molecule. All right. Cohesion and adhesion sort of work similarly because water is polar. Water molecules will cohere to one another. They'll pull on one another. So cohesion is displayed when water molecules are attracted to one another by hydrogen bonds. Adhesion, the prefix ad means to. Adhesion happens when water molecules pull on or are attracted to other substances. And a fantastic example of this is seen in the movement of water through vascular plants. So you can have a tree that's 300 feet tall, and water will move up against the force of gravity without the use of ATP because of cohesion and adhesion. When you have these narrow tubes for water, they're called xylem, or a xylem, or xyla, I guess would be the plural. These tubes are incredibly narrow. So there's this capillary action where the water molecules pull on the walls of the xylem. And then when water evaporates out through the little holes on the underside of leaves, water molecules will flow in to replace the water that's lost. Well, because of adhesion, the water molecules literally pull on their neighbors, and it draws water up through the roots, up through the vascular tissue of the plant, and out through the leaves. So you can have water traveling 300 feet in the air without ATP because of cohesion and adhesion. Now, at the interface between liquid water and the gaseous atmosphere, you create surface tension. The water molecules will, again, due to hydrogen bonds, pull on one another. And when they're pulling on one another, it creates sort of like, I hate to say invisible film, but this sheet of water molecules that are all somewhat aligned and pulling on each other. So when that happens, it creates this capacity for force to be required to move through the water. So it makes it hurt if you do a belly flop and allows basilisks to move along the surface of water. Another fascinating feature of water is the moderation of temperature. Now, temperature is a measure of average kinetic energy. So when average kinetic energy goes up, well, so does temperature. Now, if you're going to get water molecules moving faster and raise their temperature, first you have to put in enough energy to break the hydrogen bonds between the water molecules. So because of this, you have to put a lot of energy into water to break the hydrogen bonds and then get the water molecules moving faster. That's why it takes forever to get water to boil, right? Well, it's also what helps make life possible on Earth because it moderates temperature between day and night. Because the Earth is covered with mostly water and our atmosphere has a tremendous amount of water in it, what it does is it allows the absorption of energy during the day and the release of energy at night, so we don't have huge temperature swings like you see on the surface of the moon between day and night. So it's really key to the moderation of temperature, and it slows down the change of temperature in our body, right? Since we have so much water in our body, in our cells, it is difficult to sort of change our body temperature as rapidly as our surroundings. Related to body temperature is evaporative cooling. We don't really have much hair on our bodies, some more than others. But what happens is when we sweat, the water making a film on the surface of our body has water molecules with different kinetic energy. Now, the molecules with the most energy are going to escape their hydrogen bonds and turn into a gas and evaporate. Okay, so when you have water evaporate off your skin, when you have the molecules with the most kinetic energy converted to a gas and evaporating off the skin, what's left behind is water that has, well, a lower average kinetic energy. Think of like a track team for a school. If the fastest runners all graduate, that's going to lower the average speed of the track team. Well, if the water molecules with the most kinetic energy convert to a gas and disappear into the atmosphere, then the water that's left behind is going to have a lower kinetic energy, and it's going to drop your body temperature and cool you off, just like this person who decided to go and try and pull weeds when it's hot outside in August. All right. So another fascinating feature of water is that ice floats. Now, this may seem somewhat mundane, but it's actually critical to life happening on Earth. At temperatures above 40 degrees Celsius, water acts like a lot of other substances. Again, when you drop the temperature, when you drop the kinetic energy of substances, what will happen is they tend to pack in a bit. They tend to contract. And water does the same thing down to around 40 degrees Fahrenheit. Below 40 degrees Fahrenheit, the water molecules, since they have less energy, the hydrogen bonds aren't overcome as easily, and they start to spread out a little bit. And when you reach freezing, 0 Celsius or 32 Fahrenheit, the water molecules will actually not be able to overcome those hydrogen bonds that normally break and form all the time, and they get locked in place. They get locked into this crystalline lattice, and they actually get pushed apart a little bit. So when the water molecules freeze and the hydrogen bonds solidify, the water molecules get pushed apart. It makes the water less dense as ice, and so the ice floats. Now that actually ends up being really important to life because the Earth is covered in so much liquid water. If water was to sink when it freezes, then the oceans would be mostly frozen. Only thing that would ever melt is in that photic zone near the surface of the water. Or lakes would freeze from the bottom up, or rivers would freeze from the bottom up. And if that happened, ice is crystals, it would shred cells. It would kill anything that could be in the water. So it would make, big multicellular life on Earth pretty darn difficult. So thank goodness ice floats. All right, we call water the solvent of life. Now, when I was in school, they used to call it the universal solvent. That's not a great moniker because if it was a universal solvent, it would just like melt you, right? So water isn't the universal solvent, but we think of it as the solvent of life because it can dissolve a lot of things, right? Water's polar, so anything ionic, anything polar, water can dissolve it. And that's useful because you have to constantly take things into your body, right? You have to take it from outside your body, put it in your body, move it around your body. And so to be able to dissolve it is really helpful. And what will end up happening is it allows for the creation of membranes by having this sort of watery environment inside and outside of cells. And we'll get into that more later. Okay, another feature of water, we're going to talk about the pH scale. Now, the thing to remember with the pH scale, the magic number is 7. At a pH of 7, you have an equal concentration of hydrogen and hydroxide ions, all right? Now, below 7, you have a higher concentration of hydrogen ions, and above 7, you have a lower concentration of hydrogen ions, therefore a higher concentration of hydroxide ions, your OH minus, okay? Now, at a pH of 7, since hydrogen hydroxide ion concentrations are equal, it's neutral. It's basically water, right? Which is great. When you move away from neutral, you have more and more of these ions, whether it's more hydrogen ions at the lower end of the pH scale or more hydroxide ions at the higher end of the pH scale. And the thing about these ions is they're going to bust up some bonds, okay? If you have hydrogen ions floating around in solution, they're going to break bonds. And so if you have really strong acids or really strong bases, it will break bonds and substances and destroy them. So that's why things like bleach or stomach acid are really destructive. It's because they have so many ions, they can break so many bonds, they can basically liquefy tissues. There's sort of a fascinating legal case, a litigated case that got thrown out a number of years ago. There was a person who claimed that he had a dead mouse in a bottle of Mountain Dew. And the case was thrown out because lawyers for the company that runs the Mountain Dew brand successfully argued that it would be impossible to find a dead mouse in a Mountain Dew bottle because it's so acidic that a mouse that would have been in the bottle would have dissolved. So it's a review of what strong acids and bases do. If you have a strong enough acid, it will liquefy and destroy stuff. That's what people also do with ceviche. If you've ever had a ceviche dish, you can use citrus fruits and marinate like fish and the citrus fruits like lemon and lime, that kind of stuff, will break the bonds in the fish, and it will, to say it cooks it, I don't know if that's necessarily the best term, but it denatures the proteins in the fish, and so it'll become like a flaky white fish. Actually, it's really delicious. So if you ever are at a restaurant and they offer ceviche, you may just order it. Other things to mention: every step in the pH scale is a factor of 10. So if you go from pH of 7 to pH of 5, it's 2 steps. So every step is a factor of 10. So at a pH of 5, there is 10 times 10 times 10, 100 times the number of hydrogen ions. If you move from 7 to 4, it's 10 times 10 times 10. So that's 10 times 10 is 100, times 10 is 1,000. In a tomato, there is 1,000 times as many hydrogen ions as there are in water. So I think that's why people used to think tomatoes were poisonous, because tomatoes are fairly acidic. So it can leach certain metals out of containers. And so maybe people were made sick by metals that leached out of food preparation dishes, a long time ago. But anyway, it's neither here nor there. All right. Well, that's it on chapter 3. Thanks a lot. And we'll come back later for one last chapter.